Anyway, I'm going to be continuing Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose, and where we just left off, excuse me, is that Brother William, well, Adso overheard Brother William talking to the abbot. Brother William just learned that there was a murder. One of the monks was pushed out of the window of the tower in the library, which is of note because no monk, aside from the librarian and the librarian's assistant, is the allowed into the library because it's such a vast collection of knowledge, unlike any other in the world, which presents a special challenge to Brother William because he can't, break that tradition, but he also has to figure out who was the murderer. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Oh, hey, Ness. Welcome in. This is a murder mystery set in 1327 that may or may not be a medieval manuscript. It's deeply unclear because even the author, Umberto Eco, he found it in Prague and he doesn't know if it's real or not. So, but yeah, so basically there's been a murder. He can't actually view the crime scene, but he is kind of he's a Sherlock type figure with like the almost inhuman levels of perception and stuff. The the big thing to know about this is that if it's not a real medieval manuscript or like pre-Renaissance manuscript, then it's extremely well researched by whoever wrote the version that Umberto Eco found, because it is Latin, that it was originally written in Latin, and the choices in language that are used are like 150 years before when it's supposed to be set, which is like not a choice that most people would make when writing something for 1327. But the reason why is because monks tended to use older Latin than the common vernacular at the time. So, and like there's just like a lot of little details that are like extremely well researched if they weren't written when it claims to have been written. It was probably written in like the 16 or 1700s or possibly even later, but unfortunately we just like don't really know, at least according to Umberto Eco. I haven't done any research myself into it, but I personally like the romanticism of this being a manuscript that he doesn't really know anything about, but he's sharing it with the world regardless. I personally like that, and I would rather not know personally. Which, when he released this in the 70s, you wouldn't be able to check for yourself, and I prefer that way of experiencing it. Not that experiencing it in a different way is wrong, but that's just how I'm choosing to experience this piece of fiction. You've never heard of this before? Yeah, it's pretty niche. Um, it's definitely nerd shit. I haven't done any personal research. I know it's crazy. I I'm choosing not to because I personally think it keeps some of the mystery of the novel. I might research after I've read it. I Okay, it's not archaeology, it's history. So I'm not obliged because this is written, which means technically, well, I guess I am a classical civilization major, so technically I'm not an archaeologist. It's history. So I'm not obliged. Um This is like, from what I understand, this is his like reworking of it into a narrative in some ways. This is like, it's not that he's reworked it, but I think he's made some choices. This is in part a translation of the manuscript he found, and in part I think he's added some things. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure though. The thing about the foreword is it's kind of ethereal almost. I'm not gonna read it all again. It's on my YouTube channel if you want to hear it, but because it's like 15 pages. But the it definitely paints an emotional picture as much as it paints a like, excuse me, as it paints like an actual image of realistic events. But I think that that's the gist of it. We have Sherlock Monk. His Watson figure is his novice named Adso. And there's been a murder in this abbey that doesn't actually exist. It's it would be in northern Italy, just south of the mountains that separate Italy from the rest of Europe. There's not actually an abbey like this there, but that's part of what makes it fun. This right here on the screen is a map of the abbey that's included at the beginning of the book. I thought it was useful to have on screen for when it's mentioned. I don't think you guys can see my mouse, but the edificium, which is the this big tower here, right, on the north side, is where. Okay, you're fine. This big tower to the north here, one of these separate towers is where the murder took place, but it's impossible to know because the cliff is so jagged that like it's the idea is that it could fall anywhere. So at least that's the idea. But yeah. And then the building in the center is the church. And then the rest of the buildings are just like your standard, your standard monastery buildings. The names of them are on there, but I don't think they mean much to anyone else. So anyway, but yeah. So this, I'm probably going to just read a chapter because I do need to eat dinner still. But where are we at? Okay. So this is still the first day. This book takes place in the span of a week. This is sixth, in which Adso admires the door of the church and William meets Ubertino of Casale again. The church was not majestic like others I saw later at Strasbourg, Chartres, Bamberg, and Paris. It resembled, rather, those I had already seen in Italy, with scant inclination to soar dizzyingly toward the heavens, indeed firmly set on the earth, often broader than they were high. But at the first level, this one was surmounted, like a fortress, by a sequence of square battlements, and above this story another construction rose, not so much a tower as a solid second church, capped by a pitched roof and pierced by severe windows. A robust abbatial church, such as our forefathers built in Provence and Languedoc, far from the audacity and the excessive tracery characteristic of the modern style, which only in more recent times has been enriched, I believe, above the choir, with a pinnacle boldly pointed towards the roof of the heavens. Two straight and unadorned columns stood on the other side of the entrance, which opened, at first sight, like a single great arch, but from the columns began two embrasures that, surmounted by other multiple arches, led the gaze as if into the heart of an abyss. Toward the doorway itself, crowned by a great tympanum, supported on the sides by two imposts, and in the center by a carved pillar, which divided the entrance into two apertures protected by oak doors reinforced in metal. At that hour of the day, the weak sun was beating almost straight down on the roof, and the light fell obliquely on the facade, without illuminating the tympanum. So, after passing the two columns, we found ourselves abruptly under the almost sylvan vault of the arches that sprang from the series of lesser columns that proportionally reinforced the embrasures. When our eyes had finally grown accustomed to the gloom, the silent speech of the carved stone, accessible as it immediately was to the gaze and the imagination of anyone, for images are the literature of the layman, dazzled my eyes and plunged me into a vision that even today my tongue can hardly describe. I saw a throne set in the sky, and one seated on the throne. The face of the seated one was stern and impassive, the eyes wide and glaring over a terrestrial humankind that had reached the end of its story. Majestic hair and beard flowed over the chest like the waters of a river, in streams all equal, symmetrically divided in two. The crown on his head was rich in enamels and jewels. The purple imperial tunic was arranged in broad folds over the knees, woven with embroideries and laced of gold and silver thread. The left hand, resting on one knee, held a sealed book. The right was uplifted in an attitude of blessing, or, I could not tell, of admonition. The face was illuminated by the tremendous beauty of a halo, containing a cross and bedecked with flowers, while around the throne and above the face of the seated one, I saw an emerald rainbow glittering. Before the throne, beneath the feet of the seated one, a sea of crystal flowed, and around the seated one, beside and above the throne, I saw four awful creatures, awful for me as I looked at them, transported, but docile and dear for the seated one, whose praises they sang without cease. Or, rather, not all could be called awful, because one seemed to me handsome and kindly, the man to my left, and to the right of the seated one, who held out a book. But on the other side there was an eagle I found horrifying, its beak agape, its thick feathers arranged like a cuirass, powerful talons, great wings outstretched. And at the feet of the seated one, under the first two figures, there were the other two, a bull and a lion, each monster clutching a book between talons or hoofs, and the body turned away from the throne, but the head toward the throne, as if shoulders and neck twisted in a fierce impulse, flanks tensed, the limbs those of a dying animal, maw open, serpent-like tails, coiled and writhing, culminating, at the top, in tongues of flame. Both monsters were winged, both crowned by halos. Despite their formidable appearance, they were creatures not of hell, but of heaven, and if they seemed fearsome, it was because they were roaring in adoration of one who is to come, and who would judge the quick and the dead. Around the throne, beside the four creatures, and under the feet of the seated one, as if seen through the transparent waters of the crystal sea, as if to fill the whole space of the vision, arranged according to the triangular frame of the tympanum, rising from a base of 7 plus 7, then to 3 plus 3, and then to 2 plus 2, at either side of the great throne. On 24 little thrones, there were 24 ancients, wearing white garments and crowned in gold. Some held lutes in their hands, one a vase of perfumes, and only one was playing an instrument. All the others were in ecstasy, facing the seated one, whose praises they were singing. Their limbs also twisted like the creatures, so that all could see the seated one, not in wild fashion, however, but with movements of ecstatic dance, as David must have danced before the ark, so that wherever their pupils were, against the law governing the stature of bodies, they converged on the same radiant spot. Oh, what a harmony of abandonment and impulse, of unnatural and yet graceful postures, in that mystical language of limbs miraculously freed from the weight of corporeal matter, marked quantity infused with new substantial form, as if the holy band were struck by an impetuous wind, breath of life, frenzy of delight, rejoicing song of praise, miraculously transformed, from the sound that it was, into image. Bodies inhabited in every part by the Spirit, illuminated by revelation, faces overcome with amazement, eyes shining with enthusiasm, cheeks flushed with love, pupils dilated with joy. This one thunderstruck by a pleasurable consternation, that one pierced by a consternated pleasure. Some transfigured by wonder, some rejuvenated by bliss. There they all were, singing with the expression of their faces, the drapery of their tunics, the position and tension of their limbs, singing a new song, lips parted in a smile of perennial praise. And beneath the feet of the ancients, and arched over them, and over the throne, and over the tetramorphic group, arranged in symmetrical bands, barely distinguishable one from another because the artist's skill had made them all so mutually proportionate, united in their variety, and varied in their unity, unique in their diversity, and diverse in apta coadinatio, in wondrous congruency of the parts, with the delightful sweetness of hues, miracle of consonants, and concord of voices among themselves dissimilar, a company arrayed like the strings of the zither, consentient and conspiring, continued cognition through deep and interior force suited to perform, univocally in the same alternating play of the equivocal, decoration and collage of creatures beyond reduction to vicissitudes and to vicissitudes reduced. Work of amorous connection sustained by a law at once heavenly and worldly, bond and stable nexus of peace, love, virtue, regimen, power, order, origin, life, light, splendor, species, and figure. Numerous and resplendent, a quality through the shining of the form over the proportionate parts of the material. There all the flowers and leaves and vines and bushes and corums were entwined, of all the grasses that adorn the gardens of the earth, and heaven, violet, cistus, thyme, lily, privet, narcissus, taro, acanthus, mallow, myrrh, and mecabalsam. I need a drink after that. That was a lot of alliteration. My mouth's all dry. I'm really fond, since this is translated, some of it is lost, of course, because this was originally published in Latin, I believe, or in Italian, rather. Yeah. This is translated from the Italian. But yeah, so this is translated by William Weaver into, it's hard for you to keep up with. Yeah, it's definitely very, it's very, out of all of it, this is the most, like, hard to follow section of the book so far, I think. This is very, like, ethereal. It's kind of, I think it's intentional, though. For instance, what he's describing here, he's describing the top of, it's not the church, it's the, no, it is the church, okay, yeah. So this is the ceiling of the church, and it's painted, and this is a scene of God, and then the four figures around him are the four gospel writers. Kind of like when I audiobooks the Divine Comedy. Well, yeah, that's really fair. That would be a hard one to follow. And then all of the scenes around it are various creatures and people that are rejoicing. But, like, the whole point of this passage is that even though it is a scene of rejoice, it's meant to be happy, the overall sense, or what I think the point of the passage is, I should say, because I'm not Umberto Eco. I think that the overall sense is intended to be one of almost like panic and frenzy. There's not in that last paragraph I read, once you get to, I think that last paragraph, which is almost a page worth, I think it's 2 sentences. It has an occasional semicolon or colon, but for the most part, it's only commas. And I think that the way it's written, this is, of course, again translated, but it's designed to feel like you're being pulled along with it. The the bit that comes to mind for me, that I think demonstrates it the best in the English is unique in their diversity and diverse in apta coordinatio, in wondrous congruency of the parts with the delightful sweetness of hues, miracle of consonants, and concord of voices among themselves dissimilar. A company arrayed like the strings of the zither, consentient and conspiring, continued cognition through deep and interior force, suited to perform univocally in the same alternating play of the equivocal decoration and collage of creatures beyond reduction to vicissitudes and to vicissitudes reduced. Like, that is a bunch of phrases that are like repeating themselves but by being inverted, and I think that it's designed to feel like you're almost being overwhelmed by the information. And I think that that's what he was going for there, which is interesting because to some extent that is what it's like when you walk into a Renaissance period church. There's just like so much, and some of it can be really like upsetting, even though it's not meant to be. Well, not upsetting. I should say awesome in like the literal sense of the word. Like, it's just like overwhelming. And I think that's kind of what Umberto Eco was going for here. Okay, now we continue. But as my soul was carried away by that concert of terrestrial beauty and majestic supernatural signals, and was about to burst forth in the psalm of joy, my eye, accompanying the proportioned rhythm of the rose windows that bloomed at the ancient's feet, lighted on the interwoven figures of the central pillar, which supported the tympanum. What were they, and what symbolic message did they communicate? Those three crisscross pairs of lines rampant, like arches, each with hind paws planted on the ground, forepaws on the back of his companion, mane in serpentine curls, mouth taut in a threatening snarl, bound to the very body of the pillar by a paste, or a nest, or tendrils. To calm my spirit, as they had perhaps been meant also to tame the diabolical nature of the lion, and to transform it into a symbolic allusion to higher things. On the sides of the pillar there were two human figures, unnaturally tall as the common itself, excuse me, and twins to two others facing them on either side from the decorated imposts, where each of the oak doors had its jamb. These figures, then, were four old men, from whose paraphernalia I recognized Peter and Paul, Jeremiah and Isaiah, also twisted as if in a dance step, their long bony hands raised, their fingers splayed like wings, and like wings were their beards and hair stirred by a prophetic wind, the folds of the very long garments stirred by the long legs giving life to waves and scrolls, opposed to the lions, but of the same stuff as the lions. I'm not excused? Well, too bad, because this paragraph continues for another 2 pages, so you're gonna have to get over it. I don't think it's getting easier to understand from here. And as I withdrew my fascinated eye from that enigmatic polyphony of sainted limbs and infernal sinews, I saw beside the door, under the deep arches, sometimes depicted on the embrasures on the space between the slender columns that supported and adorned them, and again on the thick foliage of the capital of each column, and from there ramifying toward the sylvan vault of the multiple arches, other visions horrible to contemplate, and justified in that place only by their parabolic and allegorical power, or by the moral lesson that they conveyed. I saw a voluptuous woman, naked and fleshless, gnawed by foul toads, sucked by serpents, coupled with a fat-bellied satyr whose griffin legs were covered with wiry hairs, howling its own damnation from an obscene throat. And I saw a miser, stiff in the stiffness of death on his sumptuously columned bed, now helpless prey of a cohort of demons, one of whom tore from the dying man's mouth his soul in the form of an infant, alas, never to be again born to eternal life. And I saw a proud man with a devil clinging to his shoulders and thrusting his claws into the man's eyes, while two gluttons tore each other apart in a repulsive hand-to-hand struggle, and other creatures as well, goat head and lion fur, panther's jaws, all prisoners in a forest of flames whose searing breath I could almost feel. And around them, mingled with them, above their heads and below their feet, more faces and more limbs, a man and a woman clutching each other by the hair, two asps sucking the eyes of one of the damned, a grinning man whose hooked hands parted the maw of a hydra, and all the animals of Satan's bestiary, assembled in a consistory and set as guard and crown of the throne that faced them, singing its glory in their defeat, fauns, being of double sex, brutes with six-fingered hands, sirens, hippocentaurs, gorgons, harpies, incubi, dragopods, minotaurs, lynxes, pards, chimeras, cynophilies who darted fire from their nostrils, crocodiles, polycodate, hairy serpents, salamanders, horned vipers, tortoises, snakes, two-headed creatures whose backs were armed with teeth, hyenas, otters, crows, hydrophora with sawtooth horns, frogs, griffins, monkeys, dogheads, leucrota, manticores, vultures, piranders, weasels, dragons, hoopoes, owls, basilisks, hypnales, presters, spectafici, scorpions, saurians, whales, scitales, amphispinae, iaculae, dispaces, green lizards, pilotfish, octopi, morays, and sea turtles. Whew! I'm really quite fond of, there's a lot of things in here. First of all, frogs being included is funny. I also really I think it's probably hippos, but written from how it was pronounced in the original, and it's hoopos. I like that. The whole population of the netherworld seemed to have gathered to act as vestibule, dark forest, desperate wasteland of exclusion, at the apparition of the seated one in the tympanum, at his face promising and threatening, they, the defeated of Armageddon, facing him who will come at last to separate the quick from the dead. And stunned almost by that sight, uncertain at this point whether I was in a friendly place or in the valley of the last judgment, I was terrified and could hardly restrain my tears, and I seemed to hear, or did I really hear, that voice, and I saw those visions that had accompanied my youth as a novice, my first reading of the sacred books, and my nights of meditation in the choir of milk, and in the delirium of my weak and weakened senses I heard a voice mighty as trumpets that said, "Write in a book what you now see," and this is what I am doing. And I saw 7 golden candlesticks, and in the midst of the candlesticks one like unto the son of a man, his breast girt with a golden girdle, his head and hair white as purest wool, his eyes as a flame of fire, his feet like unto fine brass, as if they are burned in a furnace. His voice is the sound of many waters, and he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a 2-edged sword. I saw a door open in heaven, and he who was seated appeared to me like a jasper and a sardonyx, and there was a rainbow about the throne, and out the throne proceeded thunder and lightning. And the seated one took in his hands a sharp sickle, and cried, "Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." And he that sat on the cloud thrust his sickle onto the earth, and the earth was reaped. It was at this point that I realized the vision was speaking precisely of what was happening in the abbey, of what we had learned from the abbot's reticent lips. And how many times in the following days did I return to contemplate the doorway, convinced I was experiencing the very events that it narrated. And I knew we had made our way up there in order to witness a great and celestial massacre. I trembled as if I were drenched by the icy winter rain, and I heard yet another voice, but this time it came from behind me and was a different voice, because it came from the earth and not from the blinding core of my vision. And indeed it shattered the vision, because William, I became aware again of his presence, also lost until then in contemplation, turned as I did. Okay, I really it's really obvious foreshadowing, but I really like that. It's very, it was really well set up, with the whole, a lot of what it was talking about, preceding that passage was, revelation imagery. And I think that it just did a really good job of leading up to that, and then reaching a crescendo, and then stepping back off, and leaving you wanting to know more. I think that was really well done. And yes, I know that that's a lot for one paragraph, but I'm not the author, so don't take it up with me, take it up with Umberto Eco. The rules of paragraphs were not quite so strict in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, so it would actually make sense. The creature behind us was apparently a monk, though his torn and dirty habit made him look like a vagabond. Unlike many of my brothers, I have never in my whole life been visited by the devil, but I believe that if he were to appear to me one day, he would have had the very features of our interlocutor. His head was hairless, not shaved in penance, but as the result of the past action of some viscid eczema. The brow was so low that if he had had hair on his head, it would have mingled with his eyebrows, which were thick and shaggy. The eyes were round, with tiny, mobile pupils, and whether the gaze was innocent or malign, I could not tell. Perhaps it was both, in different moods, in flashes. The nose could not be called a nose, for it was only a bone that began between the eyes, but as it jutted from his forehead, it immediately sank back, transforming itself only into two dark holes, broad nostrils thick with hair. The mouth, joined to the nose by a scar, was wide and ill-made, stretching more to the right than to the left, and between the upper lip, non-existent, and the lower, prominent and fleshy, there protruded, in an irregular pattern, black teeth sharp as a dog's. Aww. You're no fun. This is artness. I think there's a movie version of it, if that's what you're asking, but I have a feeling it's probably not very good, if I had to take a guess. Let me see. I'll look it up real quick. The name of the Rose movie. Oh. Let's see. A 1986 historical mystery film directed by Jean-Jacques Annaud, based on the 1980 novel of the same name by Umberto Eco. Sean Connery stars as the Franciscan Friar William of Baskerville, called upon to solve a deadly mystery in a medieval abbey. According to Google, un monje franciscano investiga una serie de atroces asesinatos y trata de juntar las piezas del... I've never seen that word. Rompecabezas. Oh, broken skulls, or like roll. Is that broken skulls? Because that's head, and then break. Rompe. So I assume that's broken skulls, but it's one word. Del rompecabezas para descubrir al asesino. That sounds like a choice for lead roles. It really does. It has a 7.7 out of 10 from IMDb and a 76% from Rotten Tomatoes. So I guess like you can take your chances with that, I suppose, if you don't want to read this or listen to me read it. I feel like it probably misses the point a lot, if I had to guess. But, you know. I feel like it probably doesn't do a great job of reaching the heart of the story. But, you know. I'm shocked it's that weak rated. Um, I'm honestly shocked it's that good, according to people. Um, that is significantly better than what it probably deserves. If I had to take a guess. Well, what? Yeah, I expected it to be trash. Yeah, same. That's kind of what I expected. I assumed it would be terrible. Um, oh, it's that well rated. It's a typo. I see. Um, yeah, no. Apparently, it's not garbage, which is not what I would expect, if I'm being perfectly honest. Um, but you know. So if you want to watch Sean Connery in a 1986 historical mystery film, then you know where to find. Honestly, am I allowed to do that? I don't know if that is that something I can get like in trouble with um Twitch for doing. Like I don't know if that's something that I'm allowed to do. I think technically yes. I mean, that's good enough for me. It's not exactly like Twitch is coming after someone who averages 0 viewers a stream. So I used to average like 6, and then I stopped streaming for a year. So here I am. You'll show them. Yeah, take that, Amazon. Jeff Bezos, if you're listening, I didn't mean it. Please don't ban me. I'm just kidding. Jeff Bezos doesn't listen to anyone. I feel like I'm digging myself in a hole at this point. But, you know, what else is new? I'm gonna finish this beer faster than I should have because we've been talking about the movie instead of reading the book. But that's fine. I only drink one a night on weekdays, so I only drink 2 a night on weekends at maximum if I drink at all. So I'll be okay. Everything in moderation, friends. I can report back black tea, saffron, and lemon is not really my thing. I think tomorrow I'll do my usual milk tea with saffron. Yeah. I. What is. 1 second. Flavor profile of saffron. Saffron has a subtle, earthy, sweet flavor profile with a tinge of bitterness on the tongue that gives way to delicate floral and honey notes. Yeah, I feel like I thought it might be bitter. If it's, if it's bitter on the front, then that's gonna make black tea more bitter, and like black tea is already kind of bitter, so. And then I'm not sure that the floral notes would really make sense with lemon. I feel like that would work. Well, I don't know. I've had there's a drink called an aviation that's like a gin and oh my god, what's it called? It's like a gin and um oh my god, I'm blanking. That's a gin and a violet wine, and I'm not saying you're wrong, Ness. I'm not saying you did something wrong. I'm just saying I don't think I'd like it that way. I think that would be a little bit icky for me, but you know. But yeah, it's just like not a great combo. That's kind of what I would think. I really don't think that those things would go together, given what I know. Ah, thank you, Raw Spice Bar, for this wonderful description. Let me. Saffron has a subtle, earthy, and grassy flavor and aroma, yet sweet, similar to floral and honey. No spice is more special than saffron. With an unmistakable scent and flavor, saffron straddles sweet and savory effortlessly, and it bestows a striking golden hue on every dish it graces. So yeah, if you want to know what saffron tastes like, it tastes like a golden hue on every dish. Okay, to be fair, Ness, I mean, what did you expect? You're eating saffron. It's like the most pretentious spice out there. Like, it's literally the, like, I don't remember what part of the fly. It's like the stamen. I think that's what that part's called. I mean, you're getting it cheap at $6 a gram, so. Let's see. If you look at the, I'm gonna assume rolling in saffron. I have 2 whole grams, rich in saffron. I have 2 whole grams. Yeah, I mean that's like everything you need. That'll get you through for like. I actually don't know how much saffron you use in a dish. Now that I really think about it. Like, I don't know how much saffron you need for, like, paella, for instance. Oh, is Costco saffron real? I bought the saffron through Costco online, and it's a great deal, an excellent quality saffron. I use saffron in my traditional desserts when celebrating our holiday Eid and in my biryani instead of food color and flavor. Looks like 10 twigs is the most common. Okay. I mean, that's not terrible. It could be a lot worse. What is the most yeah, saffron is the most expensive spice in the world. Yeah, I know. The stigmas, that's what they're called. How much does a pound of saffron cost? Depending on the state of the market, Insider reports that 1 pound of saffron can cost upward of $5,000 per pound. So yeah, that kind of gives you where you're going. These prices can fluctuate with every growing season and every harvest. That's about 46 servings per gram. Yeah, now you get why I was like, man, how did you get it for $6 a gram? Like it's stupid hard to grow, and it's a pain to harvest, and you don't get that much of it per flower. Is there any I'm trying to see if there's any identifying information on my Google right now so I can show you. One sec. Add a new source. Google. This is like so off track from where we are, but that's fine. And it's organic and imported from Iran for $6. I mean, that's fine. Display capture. Add source. Yeah, that's fine. Can it not be like so zoomed in, maybe? The grocery store had it 12 per gram. Yeah, that's what it costs where I live, because we don't have corner stores, because America sucks. Not politically, of course, because I would never say something political on stream. Yeah, that's probably fine. Why is my... Look, man, I don't know what you want from me. Okay, can you see that now? Right, yeah. Okay. So, depending on the state of the market. But, I think my favorite question is, where is it? Why does saffron taste so bad? Real saffron tastes fine, a bit sweet, but it is a wonderful flavor enhancer. The consistency may be more unusual than the taste. It is a bit like sweetgrass or hay. Let's see, what else have we got? Can you grow saffron in the U.S.? Although there's a history of saffron growing in the U.S., the Pennsylvania Dutch have grown it since the 17th century. The practice is not as widespread in this country as it once was. Can I grow saffron in my... I mean, like... It's a very expensive poison. I mean, basically. That's all you really need. Is saffron legal to grow? Yeah. As you can see, it's a pain. Spontaneous bleeding in high doses, the most flavorful way to go. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna go out, might as well go out with, I was gonna say with a bang, but that's not really a pun. I want my death to be spicy, but that's not really a pun either. That's just like, it sounds like I just want my death to be like mildly NSFW. Which, I mean, I guess like, I'm not gonna finish that sentence. I shouldn't say that. Yeah, it is for the best. Sometimes I think that something will be funny, and I'm probably right. Oh, hey Panther, welcome in. How you doing today? I was reading, and I will get back to reading eventually. But we got started on saffron, and now we're talking about the Google search results for saffron, which my favorite is either why does saffron taste so bad, or according to Raw Spice Bar, saffron has a subtle earthy and grassy flavor and aroma, yet sweet, similar to floral and honey. No spice is more special than saffron. With an unmistakable scent and flavor, saffron straddles sweet and savory effortlessly, and it bestows a striking golden hue on every dish it graces. So that's the thing that got me on this rabbit hole, because Ness has recently purchased saffron for paella. and other uses. And we've been talking about how expensive saffron is because it's like $5,000 a pound. So, just, yeah. Here, since Panther's in here, let me go back. Okay. To here, the map. So the basic, just spicy things. Exactly. We just want the spicy things. Okay, so the Name of the Rose is a really funky book. It's by Umberto Eco. He's an Italian author. He was writing, I think from like the 30s to the 80s or something like that. And I know he was an author during World War II, and I know he was alive in 1980 because that's when this book was published. I don't know how much longer after this book he was an author. But regardless, he found a manuscript in Prague, and it detailed the story of a brother Adso, a novice, and his master, Brother William, who solved a murder mystery in a monastery that doesn't exist. And he wrote it down and translated it, and then lost the original manuscript in a really messy breakup. And then, like, it kind of just was like a side obsession for him for a few years, or for a few decades. And then he was in Buenos Aires, and he found a Latin manuscript that was the story of Brother Otso that he'd never been able to find. And so then he translated it into Italian, and wrote it down. And then this is the English translation by William Weaver. It's a very ephemeral book, I would say. I think that's the best way to describe it. It's quite disjointed. I think that you weren't here, but there was a section where there was a paragraph that was like 3 pages long. In it said things like united in their variety and varied in their unity, unique in their diversity and diverse in apta coordinatio, in wondrous congruency of the parts, with a delightful sweetness of hues, miracle of consonants and concord of voices, among themselves dissimilar, a company arrayed like the strings of the zither, consentient and conspiring, continued cognition through deep and interior force, suited to perform univocally in the same alternating play of the equivocal, decoration and collage of creatures beyond reduction to vicissitudes, and to vicissitudes reduced. Vicissitudes. So that's kind of the beast that we're dealing with here. Probably no one else wants to hear this book as much as I want to hear it, but that's okay. I'm having a very good time reading it. And then this is a map of the Abbey here. And where we are, thank you for the head pats. I appreciate them. Yeah. It's mostly me, but that's okay. I'm fine with that. And so we're dealing with a murder mystery here. A monk has been thrown out of the window of the library, which is a bit of a problem because, first of all, he's not supposed to be there because the only 2 people allowed in this specific library, because it's so vast in its knowledge, is the librarian and the librarian's assistant. Oh, that's why my computer's not charging anymore. It's because my PlayStation turned off. Battery is not charging. Well, that's a problem. I'm going to duck out for an animal night. What is an animal night? I have to wonder. Anime. Oh. I would be anime, but I couldn't get VTube Studio to work, and I just couldn't be bothered. So, that's cool. But yeah, have fun. I hope my computer starts charging eventually. Autocorrect, you shifty bastard. Yeah. I mean, it's fine. Oh, yeah, so anyway, where we are is that a monk has been thrown out of the library. No one's allowed up there, including Brother William, who, that poses a bit of a problem for Brother William, because he's the one who has to solve the murder mystery. But also, he's not allowed in the library to look at the crime scene. So that creates this own problem. And then Brother Odso, his novice, just had a vision of the apocalypse, and realized that his vision of the apocalypse was speaking of what was happening in the abbey, and that many more deaths were to come. So yeah, that's where we're at. And then I'm going to reread the paragraph that I had just read, because I think it's worthwhile, because it'll get us back into the motions of the book. The creature behind us apparently was a monk, though his torn and dirty habit made him look like a vagabond. Unlike many of my brothers, I have never in my whole life been visited by the devil. But I believe that if he were to appear to me one day, he would have the very features of our interlocutor. His head was hairless, not shaved in penance, but as the result of the past action of some viscid eczema. The brow was so low that if he had had hair on his head, it would have mingled with his eyebrows, which were thick and shaggy. The eyes were round, with tiny mobile pupils, and whether the gaze was innocent or malign I could not tell. Perhaps it was both, in different moods, in flashes. The nose could not be called a nose, for it was only a bone that began between the eyes, but as it jutted from his forehead it immediately sank back, transforming itself into only two dark holes, broad nostrils thick with hair. The mouth, joined to the nose by a scar, was wide and ill-made, stretching more to the right than to the left, and between the upper lip non-existent, and the lower prominent and fleshy. There protruded, in an irregular pattern, black teeth sharp as a dog's. The man smiled, or at least so I believed, and, holding up one finger as if in admonition, he said, "Penitentiagite." So, repent. "Watch out for the Draco, who cometh in futurum to gnaw your anima. Death is super nos. Pray the Santo Pater come to liberar nos a malo and all our sin." You like this negromancia, the Domine nostri Jesu Christi, et anco Iovis mes dulce placer mes dolor. Cave el diablo, semper lying in wait for me in some angulum to snap at my heels, but salubatore is not stupidus. Bonum monasterium, and acci refectorium, and pray to Dominum nostrum, and the resto is not worth merda. Amen, no? So this is interesting. As this story continues, I shall have to speak again, and at length, of this creature, and record his speech. I confess I find it very difficult to do so, because I could not say now, as I could never understand then, what language he spoke. It was not Latin, in which the lettered men of the monastery expressed themselves, was not the vulgar tongue of those parts, or any other I had ever heard. I believe I have given a faint idea of his manner of speech, reporting just now, as I remembered then, the first words of his I heard. When I learned later about his adventurous life, and about the various places where he had lived, putting down roots in none of them, I realized Salvatore spoke all languages and no language. Or rather, he had invented for himself a language which used the sinews of the languages to which he had been exposed. And once I thought that his was, not the Adamic language that a happy mankind had spoken, all united by a single tongue from the origin of the world to the Tower of Babel, or one of the languages that arose after the dire event of their division, but precisely the Babelish language of the first day after the divine chastisement, the language of primeval confusion. Nor, for that matter, could I call Salvatore's speech a language, because in every human language there are rules, and every term signifies ad placetum, a thing, according to a law that does not change, for man cannot call the dog once dog and once cat, or utter sounds to which a consensus of people has not assigned a definite meaning, as would happen if someone said the word blitieri. And yet, one way or another, I did understand what Salvatore meant, and so did the others. Proof that he spoke not one, but all languages, none correctly, taking words sometimes from one and sometimes from another. I also noticed afterward he might first refer something in Latin, and later in Provençal, and I realized that he was not so much inventing his own sentences, as using the disiecta membra of other sentences heard some time in the past, according to the present situation and the things he wanted to say, as if he could speak of a food, for instance, only with the words of the people among whom he had eaten that food, and express his joy only with sentences that he had heard uttered by joyful people the day when he had similarly experienced joy. Let me move my microphone back a little bit. Oh, I lost my page. There we go. Why did you say penitentiagite? He asked. Domine frate magnificentissimo, Salvatore answered, with a kind of bow. Jesus venturus est, and Leon must do penitentia, no? William gave him a hard look. Did you come here from a convent of minorites? Non comprend. I'm asking if you have lived among the friars of St. Francis. Ask if you have known the so-called apostles. Salvatore blanched, or rather, his tanned and savage face turned gray. He made a deep bow, muttered through half-closed lips a vade retro, devoutly blessed himself, and fled, looking back at us every now and then. What did you ask him? I said to William. He was thoughtful for a moment. It is of no matter. I will tell you later. Let us go inside now. I want to find Ubertino. It was just after the 6th hour. The pale sun entered from the west, and therefore only a few narrow windows into the interior of the church. A fine strip of light still touched the main altar, whose frontal seemed to glow with golden radiance. The side naves were immersed in gloom. Near the last chapel before the altar, in the left nave, stood a slender column on which a stone Virgin was set, carved in the modern fashion, with an ineffable smile and prominent abdomen, wearing a pretty dress with a small bodice, the child on her arm. At the foot of the Virgin, in prayer, almost prostrate, there was a man in the habit of the Cluniac order. We approached. The man, hearing the sound of our footsteps, raised his head. He was old, bald, with a glabrous face, large pale blue eyes, a thin red mouth, white complexion, a bony skull to which the skin clung like that of a mummy preserved in milk. The hands were white, with long tapering fingers. He resembled a maiden withered by premature death. He cast on us a gaze at first bewildered, as if we had disturbed him during an ecstatic vision. Then his face brightened with joy. "William," he exclaimed, "my dearest brother." He rose with some effort and came toward my master, embraced him, and kissed him on the mouth. "William," he repeated, and his eyes became moist with tears. "How long it has been! But I recognize you still. Such a long time, so many things have happened, so many trials sent by the Lord." He wept. William returned his embrace, clearly moved. We were in the presence of Ubertino of Casale. I had already heard much talk about him, even before I came to Italy, and more still as I frequented the Franciscans of the imperial court. Someone had told me that the greatest poet of those days, Dante Alighieri of Florence, dead only a few years, had composed a poem, which I could not read since it was written in vulgar Tuscan, of which many verses were nothing but a paraphrase of passages written by Ubertino in his Arbor Vitae Crucifixe. I would like to add that I know someone who speaks Tuscan. Nor was this the famous man's only claim to merit, but to permit my reader better to understand the importance of this meeting, I must try to reconstruct the events of those years, as I understood them both during my brief stay in central Italy, and from listening to the many conversations William held with abbots and monks in the course of our journey. My masters at Melk had often told me that it is very difficult for a northerner to form any clear idea of the religious and political vicissitudes of Italy. The peninsula, where more than in any other country the clergy made a display of power and wealth, for at least 2 centuries had generated movements of men bent on a poorer life, in protest against the corrupt priests, from whom they even refused the sacraments. They gathered in independent communities, hated equally by the feudal lords, the empire, and the city magistrates. Finally, St. Francis had appeared, spreading a love of poverty that did not contradict the precepts of the Church, and after his efforts the Church had accepted the summons to severe behavior of those older movements and had purified them of the elements of disruption that lurked in them. They should have followed a period of meekness and holiness. But as the Franciscan order grew and attracted the finest men, it became too powerful, too bound to earthly matters, and many Franciscans wanted to restore it to its early purity. A very difficult matter for an order that at the time when I was at the abbey already numbered more than 30,000 members scattered throughout the whole world. But so it was, and many of these monks of St. Francis were opposed to the rule that the order had established, and they said the order had by now assumed the character of those ecclesiastical institutions that had come into the world to reform. And this, they said, had already happened in the days when St. Francis was alive, and his words and his aims had been betrayed. Is my computer charging? No, it's dying. I'm gonna have to, one sec, let me find a charger. I don't know why it's not charging, but, I'll just unplug my switch, I guess. There we go. Okay. And then power adapter, please and thank you. Ugh. Oh my god, why is my chair? Jesus. I don't know what that was. It's probably fine. Okay. Hopefully now it'll charge. Because it says it's charging, but I don't entirely believe it. Given that it's lost 2% since I plugged it in. One sec. Okay. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. Many of them rediscovered then a book, written at the beginning of the 12th century of our era by a Cistercian monk named Joachim, to whom the spirit of prophecy was attributed. He had foreseen the advent of a new age in which the spirit of Christ, long corrupted through the actions of his false apostles, would again be achieved on earth. And it had seemed clear to all that, unawares, he was speaking of the Franciscan order. Many Franciscans had been delighted by this, even excessively so, it seems, because then, around the middle of the century, the doctors of the Sorbonne condemned the teachings of that abbot Joachim, and they did so precisely because the Franciscans and the Dominicans were becoming too powerful and influential, and they wanted to eliminate them as heretics. But this scheme was not carried out, happily for the Church, which then allowed the dissemination of the works of Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventura of Bagnoregio, who were certainly not heretics. Whence it is clear that in Paris too there was a confusion of ideas, or someone who wished to confuse them for his own purposes. And this is the evil that heresy inflicts on the Christian people, obfuscating ideas and inciting all to become inquisitors to their personal benefit. For what I was to see at the Abbey would make me think that it is often inquisitors who create heretics, and not only in the sense that they imagine heretics where these do not exist, but also that inquisitors repress the heretical putrefaction so vehemently that many are driven to share in it and their hatred for the judges. Truly a circle conceived by the devil, God preserve us. But I was speaking of the heresy, if such it was, of the Joachimites. And in Tuscany there was a Franciscan, Gerard de Borgo San Donino, who voiced the predictions of Joachim and made a deep impression on the Minorites. Thus there arose among them a band of supporters of the old rule, so that when the Council of Lyons rescued the Franciscan order from those who wanted to abolish it, and allowed it ownership of all property and its use, some monks in the marches rebelled, because they believed that Franciscans must own nothing, either personally, or as a convent, or as an order. It does not seem to me that they were preaching things contrary to the gospel, but when the possession of earthly things is in question, it is difficult for men to reason justly, and so they put them in prison. I was told that years later, the new general of the order, Raymond Goffredi, found these prisoners in Ancona, and, on freeing them, said, "Would God that all of us in the whole order were stained by such a sin." Among these freed prisoners there was one, Angelus Clarenus, who then met a monk from Provence, Pierre Oleu, who preached the prophecies of Joachim, and then he met Ubertino of Casale, and in this way the movement of the spirituals originated. In those years a most holy hermit rose to the papal throne, Peter of Morone, who reigned as Celestine V and was welcomed with relief by the spirituals. A saint will appear, it had been said, and he will follow the teachings of Christ. He will live an angelic life. Tremble, ye corrupt priests. Perhaps Celestine's life was too angelic, or the prelates around him were too corrupt, or he could not bear the stain of the interminable conflict with the emperor and with the other kings of Europe. The fact is that he renounced his papal tiara and retired to a hermitage. But in the brief period of his reign, less than a year, the hopes of the spirituals were all fulfilled, and Celestine founded with them the community known as that of the Fratres et Pauperes Eremitae Domine Celestini. On the other hand, while the Pope was to act as mediator, among the most powerful cardinals of Rome, there were some, like a Colonna and an Orsini, who secretly supported the new poverty movement. A truly curious choice for powerful men who lived in vast wealth and luxury, and I have never understood whether they simply exploited the spirituals for their own political ends, or whether in some way they felt they justified their carnal life by supporting the spiritual trend. Perhaps both things were true, to judge by the little I can understand of Italian affairs. But to give an example, Ubertino had been taken as a chaplain by Cardinal Orsini when, having become the most respected among the spirituals, he risked being accused as a heretic, and the cardinal himself had protected Ubertino in Avignon. Oh, I gotta stretch real quick. How do I? Oh, wait, what did I do? Uh-oh. Oopsies. I didn't mean to do that. That doesn't count. I'm so bad at Twitch. It's really quite unfortunate. I've not yet ordered Kamasato fried chicken, and I don't intend on doing so anytime soon because I'm broke as hell. Man, that's a throwback. I forgot that was my thing. It was Kamasato fried huali. That was just like because of a profile picture I had of Ayaka. Excuse me. How much is left in this chapter? Oh my goodness. Okay, I really would like to go do like literally anything else. Well, okay, that's not fair. That's not true. But I think I might end soon. I don't know if Panther is still here or not. I think right now no one is here. If I had to take a guess. So that's okay. I'll stop at 9 o'clock. Why is my computer dying? I don't understand. Okay, well, I'm going to stop at the end of this paragraph because something is messing with my computer. At the end of this, like, there's a page break soon. That's when I'm going to stop. As happens, however, in such cases, on the one hand, Angelus and Ubertino preached according to doctrine. On the other, great masses of simple people accepted this preaching of theirs and spread through the country beyond all control. So Italy was invaded by these fraticelli, or friars of the poor life, whom many considered dangerous. At this point, it was difficult to distinguish the spiritual masters who maintained contact with ecclesiastical authorities from their simple followers who now lived outside the order, begging for alms and existing from day to day by the labor of their hands, holding no property of any kind. And these the populace now called fraticelli, not unlike the French beggars, who drew their inspirations from Pierre Olu. Celestine V was succeeded by Boniface VIII, and this pope, oh my goodness, I do need to stop. And this pope promptly demonstrated scant indulgence for spirituals and fraticelli in general. In the last years of the dying century, he signed a bull, Ferma Cautela, in which with one stroke he condemned Bisocchi, vagabond mendicants who roamed about at the far edge of the Franciscan order, and the spirituals themselves who had left the life of the order and retired to a hermitage. After the death of Boniface VIII, the spirituals tried to obtain from certain of his successors, among them Clement V, permission to leave the order peaceably, but the advent of John XXII robbed them of all hope. When he was elected in 1316, he had Angelus Calarenos and the spirituals of Provence put in chains, and many of those who insisted on conducting a free life were burned at the stake. John had realized, however, that to destroy the weed of the fraticelli, he needed to condemn as a heretical the idea that Christ and the apostles had not owned any property, either individually or in common, and since the general chapter of the Franciscans in Perugia had held this opinion only a year earlier, in condemning the fraticelli, the Pope condemned the whole order. It would seem strange that a pope should consider perverse the idea that Christ was poor, but advocating the poverty of Christ was clearly a very short step from advocating the poverty of his church, and a poor church would have become weak in comparison to the emperor. So after that, many fraticelli who knew nothing of empire or of Perugia were burned at the stake. Okay, since my computer is dying, I'm going to go ahead and stop now. Cause, yeah.